Welcome to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project, where we're creating the blueprint to help you become the best human you can be. I'm your guide and fellow optimizer, Christopher Camp. Right now, we're all living our lives, striving for progress, and generally trying to improve ourselves, others, and the world around us. But how many of us have stopped to think about why we do this? What's the purpose behind our actions? What drives us to want to be better? Even if you've stopped to think about your purpose, do you know it so well that you could clearly articulate it to someone if they stopped you on the street and asked you, hey, what's your purpose? Probably not. But defining our purpose is absolutely critical to making progress and living a fulfilling and successful life. Accordingly, the title of our session today is How to Define and Live Out Your Purpose. Key steps defining meaning in life and work. To help us work through this today, we have certified mental performance consultant Carlos Cotto joining us. Cotto, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Chris. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Good. This is a fun topic. I'm excited to dive into it with you. And I think, Cotto, you're in a great spot to help us. So for our audience, Cotto is the head of sports psychology and mental performance consultant for the San Diego Football Club of Major League Soccer. He's previously worked in professional baseball and has worked with athletes of all levels, from youth athletes to the highest level of professional athletes across all sports. So I think he's very well positioned to help us have this discussion. The three big questions that we're going to work through today with Cotto include question number one: what is purpose, and why does having a sense of purpose matter in our personal and professional lives? Our second big question: why do so many people struggle to identify or redefine their purpose, and what common obstacles stand in the way? And then lastly, with our third big question, we'll start to get into some practical strategies and solutions. And we're going to ask, what practical steps and strategies can someone use to discover, refine, and consistently live out their purpose? Carlos, does that lineup sound okay for you today?
It sounds fantastic. Yeah, let's have some fun.
Okay, so we'll dive in and we'll start with some definitions. So, Cotto, can you tell me, how do you personally define the word purpose? What does it encompass beyond just having goals?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, Chris, and I think for the audience, one of the things that I believe is really important is that there's going to be a lot of different perspectives. There's going to be a lot of different approaches, and all of those I think can be valid. So for me personally and professionally, when we're talking about purpose, I think we're just talking about the things that we are set to do in our daily lives. Like we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different experiences. Each background and each experience is almost shaping us little by little as we walk through life. And when we think about purpose, in my opinion, I think what we're trying to figure out is just what is it that I'm set to do in my day-to-day basis. I think that differentiates from goals. Just in general, we can have goals, we can have things that we want to accomplish, we can have things that we are hunting to be able to say, oh, I was able to get this, or I was able to accomplish this, or get into this position, or have this conversation. But the difference maker there for purpose is that day in and day out we are set to do something, and that's kind of like what I would define as purpose.
And you stated that the factors that go into determining what we're set to do are really unique to each of us. So I imagine we need to take an individualized approach to sorting it out. So I look forward to having you help us figure out how we actually do that. But before we get into that, I want to clarify with you, how does purpose differ from your values?
hmm Similar to what I was mentioning before. When we talk about values, and I'm excited because I know this is a conversation that you're going to have later on in the podcast. But when we're talking about values, I think those are guidance points, right? We talk about the North Star. What is it that is the most important to us, or what are some things that are the most important to us? Purpose overall is the journey towards that, the step by step that we take. Again, similar to what I was mentioning before, if we are set to do different things on a daily basis, and maybe I can share a couple of examples. I was working with this player not long ago, and this player was saying that to him, he's very different at home than what he is on the field and what he is on the training ground. At home, he wants to be, a fun and loving dad, and he wants to be able to be very present with the people around him. On the training ground, he said, it's a little bit similar, but with a few differences. I want to be able to be, a little bit of a dog, and I want to have that dog mentality and not, leave a ball behind, and I want to just run behind every single play that I can, and my purpose is to be able to let people know that I am not going to give up. That is a little bit different than what he wants to show up at home, because at home he wants to be fun and loving, and that looks a little bit different, right? So when we're trying to figure out like what is the purpose personally, what is the purpose professionally, I see that as the step by step, as the journey, as the path that we want to take. I would say that's different from values, because the values are kind of like those guiding points. But the purpose at the end of the day is that step by step, the path that we're taking on a daily basis.
I think a lot of us can probably relate to that, even though we're not professional athletes and no longer on the training ground of the pitch. But we have different lives. Like we have our home life and we have our work life. And in that instance, or that example you gave, that individual values success and values achievement and making the most of their talents and abilities. How that looks at home is different than how that looks on the soccer field, and so I think that the value there can be the same, but the purpose might look a little bit different depending on the situation or scenario that they're in. So we'll talk more about that. And another thing that I think can often be confused with purpose is passion. So how are those two words the same or different in your mind?
Think it can be a little bit of both. I think, when we're talking about our purpose and the things that we are set to do on a daily basis, our passion can certainly help us to be able to get there. Personally, when I think about my purpose and I think about how I want to be able to impact as many athletes as I can on a daily basis, it does start a little bit with the passion that I was able to understand early on in my career, that what I wanted to do was to help people, and what I felt the most fulfilled was when I was supporting, whether it's an athlete or a performer, if it's performing arts or a business professional. If I'm supporting their careers, I know I'm helping them, and I was getting a lot of fulfillment from that. So like I know I'm passionate about that, but it's a little bit different than my daily purpose, which is to impact as many individuals as I can. I wouldn't say that I'm the most passionate about, helping everybody if I can, right? Because it's a little bit different, but it does serve to be able to understand what is my purpose. So I would say maybe a little bit different, but they can go hand in hand, because whether it's values in the question that you were asking before or passion in the question that you're asking right now, those things can propel your purpose. So we definitely want to look into all of those things when we're trying to define our purpose.
That's great. And if I try to kind of summarize what you said there and kind of layer on how I approach this, I think our values are sort of who we are as people. It defines who we are. Our purpose sort of explains why we do what we do. And then the passion is sort of the level of intensity or eagerness with which we pursue those activities. So I think they're all related, they're all critical, but they are a little bit different. So let's continue to focus on the purpose part and kind of why we do what we do. So Simon Sinek's done a great job of talking about that concept of finding your why or explaining your why. So can you tell us, how does purpose relate to finding your why?
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things that I think a bunch of professionals are doing a pretty good job, and is being able to be clear on what are the things that maybe we can tap into to be able to find that purpose, to be able to find that why. Um, At the end of the day, I think as human beings, right, there's a bunch of us that have had the opportunity to be able to do that, and that whether is because of the education that we were privileged to be able to get early on in our careers, whether it's because our home environment was really helpful to be able to allow us to tap into some of those things, whether it's different experiences that we had in our lives, whether we were going into one system or into another system that maybe values being able to articulate those things a little bit more. All of that counts. And I'm very cognizant that not everybody has had that opportunity to be able to tap into that why and to tap into their purpose. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Is I think what happens when just natural part of life of not being able to do that. But going back to your original question, Chris, I think one of the things that I know a lot of individuals have had a privilege and the blessing is to be able to be in systems, to be able to be in environments in which that is important. Um, because at the end of the day, it comes down to that, right? Like I see the environment that I'm in right now with San Diego FC, and we're talking about purpose every day. We're talking about values every day, and it's not just about talking about it. It's about being able to clearly define it and truly live your actions and commit to your actions according to those. But if I look back in my life, I know that there's been environments in which I've been into, and that's not the case. So I can only imagine that for a lot of individuals, um, that's common to not have had the opportunity to clarify some of those things and to be able to articulate on some of those things. So I'm excited that we're having this conversation because I know this is going to give some folks the opportunity to go in that direction.
Well, next question, I want to know why you think it's important that they do that. So, why do you believe having a clear sense of purpose can influence both career success and personal happiness?
Yeah, we can go back to just keeping things simple, right? Like as human beings, we have the opportunity to go to bed the night before. We have a hopefully a good night of sleep. I know it's not always the case, but if we get to have a good night of sleep, we wake up and we have to do it all over again, right? And then we finish our day, we go to bed, we wake up, and we have to do it all over again. And if we don't give ourselves the opportunity to find our purpose, to redefine our purpose, to continuously tap into that, that's when we're going to see a lot of burnout. That's when we're going to see a lot of people just easily getting distracted. That's when we're going to be able to see a lot of just people not really tapping into their motivation or their commitment. And all of these skills that we're talking about are the things that little by little can help us grow throughout time. And so to me, it's important that we get the opportunity to define our purpose, have a clear chance of articulate it in a way that we feel fulfilled about it, because at the end of the day, those are the things that are going to kind of like propel our day to day, right? Like if we have two different individuals and one individual has their purpose clearly defined and can clearly articulate it and goes daily tapping into that purpose, and then we have another individual that perhaps haven't had the chance to do that, or haven't thought that that's important to do so, we know that in the long run, this individual that does have that clarity is going to be able to continue to chip away and chip away and chip away. When this other individual that maybe hasn't had the opportunity or doesn't know the importance on that, there's that path is going to be a little bit more rocky than what the other individual is going to experience.
That's very well stated, and I think we don't always appreciate the redundant or cyclical nature of life, and you keep living day after day after day after day. And I think it is easy to get lost in that. We all oftentimes we feel like we're a cog in the wheel that just keeps chugging along. And it's pretty easy to get lost. And so I think having your purpose, you're right, it does. It helps anchor you and it sort of sets that North Star. It gives you a trajectory to shoot for and something to be striving for. And I think having that guiding purpose or principle can help immensely in the day-to-day things. You know, it helps you determine whether or not you say yes or no to a new task or an opportunity. You can ask, hey, does this align with my purpose or not? If so, I'm going for it. If not, I won't. It can also help sustain you when times get tough and you're thinking, why in the world am I doing this? You know, sort of gives you something to look back on. And I think another thing that we often don't value, I think, or we don't appreciate is if you don't define your own purpose, you're going to let somebody else determine what success looks like for you.
Mhm.
But if you have set and established your purpose, now you're living up to your own definition of success, which you have much more control over, and I think a higher likelihood of achieving it or fulfilling it. So, as a wonderful summary, Coda, let's jump into our second section and our second big question. We're going to talk a little bit about why it's so hard for people to identify their purpose. So, let me ask you this: when you first meet a new athlete or client or patient that you're working with, what percentage of them have a very well thought out and clearly articulated purpose that they can relay to you if you ask them, right? As your first introductory question.
Very little, very little. Um, I think all of them have bits and pieces of it. You can hear it, right? When they say like, "Oh, I really enjoy doing this," or I started playing because of this," or "These are a few things that are super important to me," or "This is what I'm hunting on a daily basis." And perhaps they don't have it super clearly defined, but they do have bits and pieces. So if I go back to the original question, very, very little of the individuals that I've had the chance to work with, that they have had, let's say, for example, the opportunity to clearly define it prior to perhaps getting the opportunity to work on that specifically.
And I think that's true of athletes, but that's true of the rest of us. Some of us we kind of have a feel for it, but we don't really have it nailed down. So why do you think we all hesitate with this, or what are some of the most common barriers that keep us from really nailing down our purpose?
So many, so many. Again, like one of the things that I think it's interesting about the work that I get to do with whether it's athletes or just high performers in general is the fact that there is so much that goes on a day to day, right? Like not only on our day to day simple tasks, like being a normal human being, that it already takes so much, on a day to day, but we also have to add the technology that we use on a daily basis, the fact that we are interacting with other people in a daily basis, the fact that we're trying to be the best version of ourselves, and maybe we're coming through a society where society is not really telling us like, let's actually do a little bit of inner work to then be able to be our best. Society usually is telling us just go, 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 and crush whoever gets in front of you, right? And all of those things I think can get in the way of us being able to just maybe take a couple of steps back, make a pause, and really have the opportunity to just identify not only what's important to me, not only what am I super passionate about, but also again, what am I set to do on a daily basis? Like, why is it that I'm doing what I'm doing the way that you're defining it, Chris? So I think there's so many different things that get in the way, for individuals to be able to really just have an opportunity to define their purpose.
You know, I think that oftentimes we think of this as something that companies need to do or teams or organizations. They have to determine their purpose and values and mission statement and aims and all of that sort of stuff. But ultimately, do you think that this is something that doesn't just apply to companies? Like, should we all as individuals be doing this, or is this just for CEOs and elite athletes?
No, this is for everybody, because again, we don't know where we're gonna be in 5 to 10 years, right? Like we don't know if like by us being able to take that course, or by us being able to get these couple of exercises done for my inner work, like we don't know if that's gonna tap into a version of ourselves that we have never seen, and all of a sudden we're gonna like continue to grow in our company and eventually get to be that CEO. So like we don't need to be a CEO. We don't need to be part of leadership to be able to get some of these exercises done. At the end of the day, I think what we're talking about is being able to live a much more fulfilled life. And that is for leadership, that is for professional athletes, that is for the folks that are graduating college, but that's also for the folks that maybe are going through high school, maybe the folks that are going through elementary school, right? Like it's never too early to be able to define Like, why do I do what I do on a daily basis? What am I set to do on a daily basis? Because again, if we tap into those things, we're just gonna enjoy much more what we're doing. We're gonna be able to feel a little bit more fulfilled, and so that doesn't need to be. We don't need to be a CEO to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's not too late to start and it's never too early to start. You know, if you grow up learning how to do this and think about this, it's going to be much easier for you as you get older and life throws new problems and challenges your way. And speaking of growing and challenges and transitions, is purpose something that should be determined early on and then stays the same for our entire life? Or should we allow it or maybe even expect it to change as we develop and evolve and go through life transitions, you know, getting married, having kids, moving, changing jobs, et cetera?
That might be one of my favorite questions, and I think I think what is normal for people to perhaps go into and think about is like, okay, like if I do it once, I should be set, and I should be, good for life. And perhaps we have the opportunity to do it when we're 20, 24 years old, right? And it's so hard to believe that that's going to be the case, that when we are, let's say, 55, 60-year old, that's going to be the same purpose that we had before. And again, it's interesting because we also, as human beings, we have so many roles on our day to day, right? We're a son, we're a daughter, we are a partner, we are a dad, we're a mom, we're a husband, we're a wife. We go to work, and at work, perhaps right now we have this position, but again, in 5 years we're going to have a different position. Perhaps it's more leadership, perhaps it's people management, like so many different things. Just being a human being in general, right? Like it's really important for me to hopefully have the opportunity to show people how purpose can change, and it is okay to change. And when purpose changes, I think you have the opportunity to also get to see how, as a human being, not only you're evolving, but you have the ability to change. And when you see that you have the ability to change, and you start kind of like having that perspective, change that is inevitable later on in life, you're going to be able to tackle that with a little bit more space, with a little bit more acceptance to those nuances, right? So hopefully the people that are listening to this, they give themselves the opportunity to, yes, define your purpose at home, define your purpose in the workforce, define your purpose maybe apart from home life and workforce life, and you're just doing it for yourself as a human being. And then being able to do those, let's say, for example, three things. Next, when you have a different moment in your life, in your career, you're going to have the opportunity to understand this process is normal and I can go through it again.
So, speaking of those different roles that we have, how big of an impact should we allow those have in determining our purpose? Meaning, do I have the right and privilege to completely determine it myself? Or should I be factoring in my other roles, responsibilities, expectations, maybe of my family, my employer, my coworkers, my teammates, et cetera? So, society at large, I think there's pros and cons of allowing some of those external expectations, whether they be by family, work, or society, to shape you. Can be good and bad. So, how do we navigate those external expectations when we set out to define our purpose?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it comes down to, and again, for the audience, I think this is I'm cognizant about the privilege and the blessings that some individuals maybe have right now in their lives, that maybe they have the opportunity to go into some of these conversations, right? Like, I'm cognizant that not everybody has the opportunity to get into these conversations and say, huh, I do have the mental bandwidth to be able to do this type of exercises. Some folks, they just have not the opportunity in this very moment. Hopefully that changes. For the folks that do have the opportunity and do have the, let's say, for example, the support, because being able to do these exercises, you can do them alone, and sometimes that can be quite taxing, that can be quite heavy. So if you have an opportunity to get into it with an accountability partner, or if you have the opportunity to go and have an inner process with a professional, um, I do believe that you have the capabilities, as human beings, we have the capabilities to be able to go both directions, Chris, to your question, right? Like you can set a specific purpose to yourself in the different roles that you have, that maybe that purpose is coming from you and what you believe is important to you. But we also know that life is quite nuanced, and we can actually see that our many roles also bring a lot of different expectations. And so we can also set a different purpose for those expectations and for those external factors. Because let's say, for example, I go into my role here at San Diego FC. And if I'm only living by my own personal purpose or professional purpose, I potentially might not be paying attention to what is important to that system. But then if I have the opportunity to have that, I know I'm going to feel fulfilled with myself. And if I have the opportunity to also, let's say, for example, set a purpose that is going to be a little bit more related to that specific system, I know I'm also paying attention to what I believe that the system deems as important. And so not only I'm paying attention to myself, I'm also paying attention to the system that I'm a part of. Because when I go to work, when I go to this system, we know that it's certainly not just Goto. It's a lot of different individuals. It's a lot of different tiers to those systems. And that system has its own set of values, its own set of like passion as well. So that also should inform my purpose within that system. So again, going back to the main two things that are important to this question is I'm aware that people have the privilege to go into those exercises. Some people don't just yet. I hope that that changes. And for the people that do have the privilege to go into those, yes, hopefully you have the opportunity to set yourself with a personal, professional purpose and also understand what is the system that you're being a part of. And hopefully you have the guidance when you're going through those exercises. But yeah, I would say it's a little bit of, it can be a little bit of both.
That's a great way to think about it, doing it personally for yourself and then also within the system you're in. And I think if you think about it in terms of making it align with the system that you're in, you might discover that you can't get it to align with that system. In which case, that might be a sign to you that you either need to, if you're in a leadership position, maybe you need to change that system that you're in, or maybe you need to think about switching and getting into a new system. If that's a group organization that's not consistent with who you are, then maybe it's time for you to make a move. So I think it can be really helpful in that regard as well. And so let's transition into our third section where we're going to start to talk about some actual strategies that folks can take. And this next question, I'm going to ask you for some examples of purposes. Now, but before I do it, I do want to clarify for the audience, we have to be really careful just adopting the purpose of somebody else, because we also don't want to just adopt somebody else's definition for success. I think we can use them as examples, we can learn from them, but we shouldn't just blindly accept them or adopt them onto our own personalities and our own gifts, talents, and situations. So don't just accept them blindly without thinking through it. So I wanted to give that caveat first, but can you just kind of help sort of prime the pump to get people thinking? Can you list some common examples of purposes that people often have for themselves?
Yeah, yeah. I can start with my personal purpose because I think I understand that in our field, self-disclosure has to be used very intentionally. And I think this is a good example of that. For me, my purpose and the purpose that I try to live by on a daily basis, as I was mentioning before in the call, is to be able to impact as many individuals as I can. That is my purpose. Um, Again, that is coming from in different moments in my life when I was having the opportunity to support different individuals, to help guide different individuals. I think I was feeling um, a sense of fulfillment that I maybe haven't felt in different occasions in my life. And so that's kind of like where I started paying attention a little bit and a little bit more to how I enjoy helping and how I really, really enjoy guiding folks. So that ended up becoming my purpose. I think that's one example that I can provide. I think another example that I can provide is a head coach that I have been able to have the opportunity to work with in previous years. And the purpose for this head coach was really being able to, aside of the sport, give the opportunity to those athletes to understand that they were much more than a professional athlete. That was his purpose. I think because of remembering the conversations and hearing this coach speak is also similar in the sense of the little information that I provided of how I got to my purpose. And for him, it was different life experiences that he had in the past where he was super integrated and super ingrained in what he was doing, and that changed in his life. Previously, he was a soccer player. Then after that, he went into a different business, a different profession. Then after that, he went into like being a student again. And in each of those, I remember him sharing that he felt that that was the end all be all for him, and how those situations changed. By the third time that that changed, he realized how important it is for him to understand that he is much more than what he's doing. Then that was able to give him the opportunity to say, now that's what I'm going to live by on a daily basis. I'm going to allow my athletes and allow the people that I work with to understand that they are much more than a professional athlete. And that's what he goes by on a daily basis. That's his purpose. And I think the last example that maybe um, I would like to provide is one colleague of mine that I have always looked up to very much so. Um, and I think one of the things that she usually talks about, and she tries to live by, and I have seen it because I've seen this colleague work with, and I've had the chance to work with her, but I've seen this colleague do it more than 5 years in a row. I would say like that's something that is important to me, right? Like how consistent we are in being able to tap into our purpose, and is to be able to really give minorities a voice. That's her purpose. It's being able to understand that like a lot of people have a lot of privilege that might not be able to change. But if there's one thing that we can change, and this is something that I know she lives by, is being able to pay attention, to give a platform, to continue to educate, to continue to create awareness in people, into minorities sometimes don't have a voice. And as an individual, I know she wants to give them a voice, and I have seen her on a daily basis be able to commit her actions into that. So again, similar to what I was mentioning before, I think is life experiences that we have along the way that allow us to understand, okay, like what is it that I truly want to live by, and that I want to have my path set to be, and I think those things help us. But those are three examples, clear examples that come to mind for people to think about. Okay, like that's a little bit of what purpose sounds like, and potentially can also look like.
Those are terrific examples, and I appreciate you sharing it. And I guess in the name of vulnerability, I'll tell you. So for the Human Optimization Project, we similarly are purpose driven, and part of my purpose in doing this is that number one, I really genuinely believe that people can do and achieve more while simultaneously improving their wellness. I genuinely believe that's true. I also think the world needs it desperately. And then third, we can help give them the resources to do that. And so that is sort of our purpose, is to show the world that they can achieve more and improve their wellness, and give them examples of how. And so that's one, and that for me, that's unique to the Human Optimization Project. I do have different purposes for different areas of my life, but that's the one for this project. So can you tell, we talked a little bit about getting help and professional coaching in this, which is an option for a lot of people, but not an option for many people. So for those that maybe don't have access to a professional coach or mentor, any tips you would give them to getting some help and accountability in this, other than listening to this discussion that we're having right now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, things that I bring to my athletes and to the people, the high performers that I get to work with day in and day out, is let's just take a look back into the things that we have gone through in life that we deem are important, and that we deemed uh, have shaped who we are today. right? So like if we make a list of like, I don't know, let's say 3 to 5 things that we have gone through that we believe have been of impact on who we are today. I would say like it's one of the things that I bring to my athletes, and that's just to be able to understand why. Why is it that those things are important? There's usually something that comes out of that discussion. Another element that I believe comes to mind that I have been able to bring into session with some of my athletes and some of the high performers is, let's go back again and just look at what are the main 2, 3 things that we truly have found joy in doing in our life, right? Like if we really think about that sensation of freedom, that sensation of pure joy, um, that great energy that maybe we had the opportunity to be able to live in the past. um, let's bring that into the conversation again. So now we're thinking about what are some things that were super impactful to us, and what are some of the things that we enjoy the most. Now from there, and I tell my athletes and high performers this all the time, I don't have the answers. So like I'm asking these questions purely just to understand what's there, right? And as these athletes, these high performers start to like identify those things that are important to them, things that they have, done that gives them joy, perhaps we start seeing that maybe there are some connections that we can start making and that we can start formulating. Now, if for some reason we bring those 3 to 5 things that were super important and impactful to us in our early life, things that maybe we do enjoy and have enjoyed so much in doing, if we for some reason don't have the opportunity to find some sort of connection into those, then I bring a third element. um, and that third element is more of like the present moment that I also believe is super important to just understand, okay, like with everything that we have lived by in our past, in everything that we have enjoyed doing beforehand, let's just put that into like the left side for a second, and in the right side, let's just really truly understand what do I what do I believe is the most important to me right now with what I know about my life. And usually, that third element, I think what gives people is just an understanding of, this is where I'm at today, and this is what I believe is important to me, that I can start taking a few additional steps from now on. Now, the nice thing about all of this, Chris, is that those first couple of things that I was bringing on in terms of like the things that happened prior in our lives that maybe are important, things that we have found joy. I know I was saying like maybe we haven't found like those connection points. Like these folks are going to end up finding those connection points at some point soon, right? Is maybe that we're not seeing it at that very moment because, again, we don't usually think about those things. So if we think about it for once, it's going to be like, yeah, I don't really see it. But because we already started becoming aware of those things a little bit more and a little bit more, and now we're bringing our present moment focus into the picture, now we're going to start putting things together. And little by little, I can tell that that individual is starting to think, I'm going to do this because this is important to me. I'm going to do this because I truly find joy in this. And I'm going to do this because this is where I'm at right now. And usually I would say like that is a formula for what our purpose can potentially be on a daily basis.
That's a great, I love that three-step approach. I think that is tremendous. And the thing I would layer into that as well is that if you have the opportunity to discuss this with a coach or mental skills professional, do it by all means. But if not, think about the other people in your life who genuinely care about you and want to see you living out your purpose, and talk to them about it too, because oftentimes you may have a hard time connecting the dots between what's been impactful, what's brought you joy, but sometimes other people can say, you really light up when you do X, or I see you come alive when you do Y. And so I do think, finding somebody in your life, they don't necessarily have to be a professional, but somebody who loves you, cares about you, and knows you can be helpful in that process. So, Kodo, any last, before we wrap up and get into the summary, any last tips, tricks, or recommendations you would have for our audience as they try to start in this process?
Two main things that I believe are important to me and that I usually bring up in session two. One, by us being able to get this work done and do some of these exercises, that by no means it means that now we're going to find it super easy on a daily basis to be able to tap into that, and that everything is going to be smooth sailing from now on. That would be such a disservice to the individual if I were to say that. So what I'm saying here is, if you have the privilege, if you have the bandwidth, if you have the opportunity to do some of this work, of course, do it. Try to enjoy the process. And remember that you most likely are still going to hit bumps in the road. And those bumps are okay. Those bumps are normal. Those bumps are a natural part of life. The nice thing is that if we do have the opportunity to do some of these exercises, is now we're actually facing bumps, facing obstacles, facing challenges with a little bit more in our toolbox, with a little bit more to be able to tackle those and to be at the ready. Now, the flip side of that is, if we don't do anything of this type of work, we're still going to face those bumps, challenges, and obstacles, and we truly don't have something to fall back to. So I try to say that, because if we don't name those things, Chris, I think it's going to be easy for people to say, oh, but I did that, I did the inner work, and all of a sudden I'm still going through challenges. Yeah, that's not going to change. That's still going to be there, but at least you're a little bit more ready with it. That would be one thing. And then the other thing that I usually bring up in conversation is, and I think you mentioned it already, like perhaps we don't have the opportunity to do this work with a mental performance coach, or with another professional that can help you with that. And sometimes we shy away from the people that we have the closest, because being vulnerable in those instances is quite challenging. Please give yourself the opportunity to do that. Whether it's with your partner, whether it's with a son or daughter, whether it is with your mom or dad, if they're still, if you have the opportunity to still have them in your life, like, that is such a great conversation to have. Even myself, I'm one to say I sometimes don't have those conversations. But I know that when you do have those conversations, it can be much more powerful as well, because those are the people that truly care about you. And there's a lot of special things into that equation as well. So if you have the opportunity to do something like that, please go for it.
And I think one of the ways you can open up those conversations is to offer to make it a two-way street and say, hey, I'm trying to sort through this and figure this out. Here's what I think. What do you think? How do you handle this? Teach me what you've done that's worked or hasn't worked. And you might find they're saying, oh, I actually haven't done that much and I need to work on it myself. And now you've opened up the door for a two-way, they can help you and you can help them. And then I think that makes it much more fruitful. So this has been a tremendous discussion, Kodo. I really appreciate it. I've been taking notes as we've been talking, and I'd like to run through a few of the highlights for me. And then I'm going to give you a chance to kind of rapid fire answer our big three questions. So for me, some of the things that I found new and unique and interesting was how you define purpose is, what is it that I am set to do? And a lot of that is shaped by who we are, where we're from, what our background is, what our situation is. So it really is something that needs to be individualized. We also talked about the difference between values, purpose, and passion, with values being kind of who you are at your core and what's important to you. Purpose is sort of why you do what you do. And passion is how strongly or energetically you pursue that purpose. We also talked about some of the benefits of purpose being that it decreases the risk of burnout. It allows you to stay focused, minimizes your chance of distraction, gives you sort of a North Star that grounds you. It'll help you to determine whether or not you need to say yes or no to new opportunities and to take those on. It'll help sustain us when times get tough, and it allows us to set our own definition of success, in which we have a much higher likelihood of hitting and achieving. Also, we talked about the fact that purpose is typically personal, but you have to consider the system that you're in as well. And hopefully it can be something that's consistent with that. And then I liked at the end when you sort of gave us that approach on how we define or determine our own purpose. So reflect on your past and think about the big things that have impacted you. Ask yourself where you found joy along the way, what really makes you come alive, and see how you can connect those things. And then you have to consider that in reference with the present moment and how you can bring it into your life now. And then the cautions that you gave us are, it's not going to be easy. You'll be more prepared to handle challenges, but it doesn't mean the challenges are going to disappear necessarily. So don't be surprised with that. And then use accountability however you can get it. A friend, loved one, a professional, whatever you've got. So this was excellent. So now I'll give you a chance to answer those three big questions, kind of rapid fire here. So question number one, what is purpose and why does having a sense of purpose matter in our personal and professional lives?
When you wake up, open your eyes, and you have the opportunity to say, okay, like, what am I going to do today? What am I set to do today? And am I going to enjoy it? That's my purpose. Important because thankfully we have the opportunity to live life, and on a daily basis. If we don't have the opportunity to do that, it can get quite challenging, even more so than the normal challenges that life brings us. So that would be purpose, and that's why it's important.
And second big question, why do so many people struggle to identify their purpose and what common obstacles stand in the way?
I think we are bombarded with not just information, but just like the daily cadence of our lives. It has so much going on that thinking of our purpose, identifying our purpose, articulating our purpose is not one of them usually. So I think overall distractions, normal distractions, are the things that get in the way.
And question number three, what practical steps can someone use to discover, refine, and live out their purpose?
Think about the things that have impacted you the most. Think about the things that you find joy uh, you find joy in the most, and then just think about where you're at in life right now. Try to put those three things together, and little by little, I know you're going to be able to find what is it that you believe your purpose is.
Yep. We always try to end each session with a challenge or a call to action. And you set us up very nicely for this. I mean, you've sort of given us a step-by-step approach. So obviously our challenge today is going to be the first step of that. So I want you to sit down and think about what are the things in your past that have brought you joy or had a huge impact on you, and try to come up with at least three things and write them down. And I think that is sort of step one, as Kodo's described for us. So that's your challenge for today. Once you're able to do that, then go through the rest of the process, see how you can connect those, see how that would apply to your current life today. Then ultimately, my goal for you would be able to determine what your purpose is in whichever area of your life. And if you have multiple purposes, that's okay. But get it to a point where you can actually clearly articulate it to another person. And probably the easiest way to do that is try to write it down. Try to write it down. Keep it simple, one sentence, no more than that if you can help it. So in the end, you want to get to where you've gotten it written out and very clearly articulated. So that's it, Optimizers. Carlos Kodo did an expert job walking us through this session, which was titled How to Define and Live Out Your Purpose, Key Steps to Finding Meaning in Life and Work. Kodo, thank you so much for joining us today and letting us learn from your experience and wisdom.
Thank you, Chris.
To our audience, remember to live intentionally, consistently, better. Keep striving to be the best human you can be and never stop optimizing. Thanks for listening to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project. If you like this episode, hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find us. Know someone who might benefit? Share the episode with them to join us in our mission to help as many people as possible become the best humans they can be. Have feedback or a topic idea? Email us at optimize@mayo.edu. And be sure to look for us on Instagram, X, and YouTube.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be relied upon for medical, professional, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional for any questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.